thank you for joining us for today's, the first session of a three-part session on PowerPoint and LeaderGuide Pro. So in this PowerPoint Masterclass, we're going to be looking at building out or using PowerPoint within the realm of LeaderGuide Pro through all its iterations. Today, session 1, we're going to be digging into the basics. In session 2, we're kind of adding, we're going to be adding on to what we do today. So today's really a foundational, right? Hence why we called it the basics. So it's a foundational piece. In session 2, we're going to be digging into things like add and replace and some of the higher end features from there. And then in the final session, which will be on November 27th, we're going to really look at, the small intricacies that can really take us, our development from, let's say middle of the pack to premier user of the PowerPoint functionality within LeaderGuide Pro. So that's kind of, high level what we're looking at. But for today, we're going to be digging into really three main pieces. The first area is what I'm calling getting prepared, right? How do we set ourselves up for success using LeaderGuide Pro? We're going to also be looking at the functionality of content of the PowerPoint content blocks. And then lastly, we're actually going to be looking at building a guidebook directly from PowerPoint into LeaderGuide Pro. We're also going to look at it from how do we take, if we're building, how do we go from a guidebook to building out PowerPoint slides? So those are the three main things that we're going to be looking at working on today. So let's jump in, and we're going to get into the first area, which like I said, is what I'm calling the getting prepared section. And so with this, I've really set up a series of questions to help you kind of set the stage. And when we send out the recording, I will give you all these questions in kind of a checklist form, so you don't necessarily have to be writing everything down, quick, at this moment. But so let's first start. The first question I would say is, we're trying to get prepared. Where is our material located, right? Where's that slide deck? Wrong way. So where is that slide deck? So if your slide deck is located in one of these three areas, it's in OneDrive, it's in SharePoint, it's in a network drive like your N drive or your H drive, not on like your C or your D drive, which are generally going to be directly in your system. If these are in those locations, these are not the best place to build a LeaderGuide Pro document from. And the reason I say that is these networked drives, SharePoint, OneDrive, the H drive, the N drive, one of the network drives, there is a latency or lag that can happen as your system, your computer processor, reaches out across the internet or intranet to those other drives. And now you're talking with that processor over there, and then that's sending stuff back over the intranet or internet back to your system, and now it's being processed there. When we go and we're building a guidebook from PowerPoint with LeaderGuide Pro, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in your processor, right? We're taking your slides and we're converting them into images. We're taking your notes. That's being moved from a PowerPoint into a temporary holding place, what we call a scratch file, and then that's then brought over into the LeaderGuide Pro document. Now, if that has to be going and happening across multiple, across a lagged or a slowing down, intranet or internet, and then the other system, it can either slow things down where it increases the amount of time it takes, or it can actually stop it from happening. So ideally, what you're going to want to be looking at doing, instead of using these as the place that PowerPoint is, bring it over directly onto your hard drive. If you're using our library local, which hopefully is installed directly onto C users, your name, and you can kind of see the path on that up there. But C users, your name, documents, and then generally the LeaderGuide Pro library local should be sitting there. It should not be in OneDrive. and this is the library local. You can use our file structure. You can use your downloads folder. Just make sure it's not sitting on a network drive like OneDrive. I will point out that your desktop, if you go, oh, I'm just going to save it to my desktop, desktop is now within the world of OneDrive. So you just want to make sure if you're looking at that path up there, right, that you kind of see across your files and folders, that it's C users, your name, and then something. You don't want to be in, OneDrive there. Again, you can use this stuff, I'm not saying not to use OneDrive, not to use SharePoint. I'm saying use those for the places where you're saving into, so if something happens to your system, it's protected, it's on a network drive. But I like to think of it as like I'm checking the stuff out of, my networked drives, bringing it to my desktop, working it on my desktop, and then saving it back up into the network. So everything that's in my network drive is at the stage where it's, I'm ready for it to be delivered, or, I'm stopping for a little bit and I want it to be protected. But if I'm actually working, I am working directly onto my system. So, where is that slide deck located? Very important question. Then let's look at, is your slide deck in order? And this doesn't necessarily mean, is slide 1, slide 2, slide 3 all in order? And yes, that it does matter, but there's more to it, right? Are all the edits I need to make, or that need to be done at this point, already done? Like, is my PowerPoint at a stage, if this is my starting place, is that at a stage where I'm ready to move everything across? But other questions that kind of fall under, is this in order? Are there notes with the slides? Is there a relevant text on the slides? Do you have hidden slides? Or do you have slides that don't need to be extracted? But so let's look at this. Are there notes on your slides, right? So when you're looking at your PowerPoint, right, and you've got the image up, and again, we've got, God, I'd be the worst weatherman. But when you're looking at this, right, the notes section of your PowerPoint, this is going to be transferred over to the notes content block in LeaderGuide Pro. And this is why we're going to talk about the functionality of the content blocks. But do you have notes? And the reason why this matters is when we get to this final, the final dialog box when we're importing in our PowerPoints, we've got choices that we're making. One of the sections is, what are we bringing over? Are we just transferring over our slides? Like maybe our slides, we have slides, but there's no notes. Well, then we're just going to mark slides only. Maybe the notes are great, but the slides aren't good. And so I'm just going to work with my notes because I'm just bringing that over. I'm going to create newer slides later on. Our case today, we're going to do both. And in session 3, we're going to actually talk about this format and time tags that are in there. Right? Is there a lot of relevant text on the slides? Right? So that example I gave you where the subject matter expert typed everything they possibly knew about a subject and they put it onto the slide. Well, if they go that route, you don't have to copy and paste it. There's a functionality, again, when we're on that last dialog box and what are we bringing over, where we have the capabilities to come in under the options section and choose extract text. And when we mark that, not only are we going to get the slides and the notes or whatever we've chosen in that transfer section on this, but it will give us a separate content block with everything that was in a text box on each slide into that content block. So now I've got this material that I can start manipulating as I move forward. So I've got a lot of information just off my slides, and just based off of knowing what I have sets up the pathway or the journey I have to take it from slides and notes and get it into a LeaderGuide Pro document. Are there hidden slides? And I should have added into this, are there items that we don't want to have extracted? So if you've got a hidden slide, right, which is on that image that way, right, in PowerPoint, when you're looking kind of at that task pane on the left-hand side, which shows you which slide, all the slides that are in the deck. There's a mark that will show that's a hidden slide, and it grays it out a little bit. It's not as vibrant of a picture. When you bring in a PowerPoint deck that's got hidden slides into LeaderGuide Pro, anything that's hidden gets ignored. They don't come over. So this is going to play a role when it gets to slide numbering. Again, we're going to talk about slide numbering further in depth in session 3, but we don't see those. Or maybe, if you build PowerPoint decks more along the lines where I do, with more of the morph transition, and slides are kind of building off of each other up to a final look and feel. Well, maybe there's certain slides I don't want to have come over. So there's one of the dialog boxes when we're bringing these in about putting in our table of contents, there's a functionality where we can set up which slides do we not want to have come over. And I can mark these to do not extract, and it'll show it over on the left-hand side of the dialog box, when I click the do not extract, which is on the right-hand side. Right? So do not extract's kind of in the bottom right-hand side of that dialog box, and I can mark it up. But again, knowing what I have and knowing where I want to get to is really going to help me develop the final look and feel just based off of knowing what I have in my slides. A few other questions. Do we have course outline? Do you have a structure or an outline? Or have you put sections into that PowerPoint? Both of those play a role, again, when we're building out our table of contents. And on the same, the create a TOC outline page, this is where we can come in and put in the course structure, our modules and our lessons, right from our PowerPoint deck. The left-hand side of this dialog box is showing us all the slides. If you've got sections in your PowerPoint, you'll already see, depending on what section you use, you'll see module and lesson names already in there. We can go over on the right-hand side and rename them. We can move those up and down if things have changed. So having our structure or knowing it, we can kind of jumpstart our whole process of getting our structure from our slides into our guidebook by spending a couple minutes on this dialog box, which again, we're going to do this. This one is what we're going to spend more time with on session 2. But these are all things to consider as we're building out in the beginning. Are your notes formatted? So in that notes section of PowerPoint, right, where we've kind of built, you've got your slide, you've got your notes, how much formatting do you have in there? The reason I ask, twofold, when you import your slides, you bring over your slides and notes, ideally the notes are, we basically strip out the formatting when we put it into the notes block. And the reason why this happens is so that we can now tie the formatting of your notes to the style guide in LeaderGuide Pro. And now whoever's building, we have, what size, what font, what color, all of that stuff for your headline text, for your body text, for your bullets and your numbers, which is determined by the style guide template that's part of your LeaderGuide Pro collection. In session 3, we will talk about, there are times where you get that PowerPoint deck and someone has to, they're like, I need a program, I need a quick facilitator guide, and the course is happening tomorrow morning. And the notes are kind of already, formatted out, flushed out in PowerPoint. There's a way you can pull it over with that formatting, but now it's not tied to your LeaderGuide Pro doc. It's not tied to your style guide, so your look's going to be disparate. So it's kind of a break in case of emergency function. It's not something we should really take advantage of, because the more you do that, the more you open yourself up for disparate looks. And one of the big things we're trying to do with building facilitator guides is about creating consistency. And one of those things in consistency is, what is the look and feel, right? What's fonts, what sizes, what colors, and if I'm building it, if you're building it, if Bob's building it, that we all are building and giving the same look and feel, so that whoever's leading the training has exactly what they need. All right, and last question is, are you building from multiple decks, right? Do we have a course that is built, the training's built, and there's 2, 3, 4, 7 different PowerPoint decks that make up this entire course that's going into our guidebook. Why this is important, and this is an area we're going to dive deeper into again in another session, but because we're getting prepared, these are all things we should be considering. One of the preferences when you can set in LeaderGuide Pro is slide numbering. Is it sequential? Meaning, if you've got 70 different slide content blocks in a LeaderGuide Pro document, it's slide 1 through slide 70. Absolute would be we've brought over a slide deck and the first 2 slides are hidden and slide 3 is really what's being shown. The first content block would show slide 3. It wouldn't show slide 1. Right? Above the slide, it's above the content block. And then restart by module would be after each module, right? So module 1 in your training, it would be slides 1 through 12. When we get into module 2, the numbering would restart at slide 1. So that's one of the things, if you're working with multiple decks, are you going with sequential, or are you going restart by module? Which one of those is going to be the one that works for you? Other thing, when we're working with multiple decks, we definitively need to know how the add function works, so that we know when we use add, where do those slides drop, so that we can make sure we're building as effectively as possible. So with that, are there any questions at the moment? I am not seeing any. And if you are asking and if I don't see it, please feel free to speak up so that we can make sure we're not missing anything from it for you guys. All right. So the next section that we're going to be really talking about is we're going to dive into the idea of content block functionality. And so what do I mean by that? So if we look at the actual content blocks that LeaderGuide Pro uses, right? So there's 2 distinct content blocks for PowerPoints. There's the slide block, which you're seeing, on the top side of this slide that I'm showing, and slide numbering, what we were just talking about, where it says slide 1. That's what I mean by slide numbering. So slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, that number is going to, how that's displayed is what's shown when we talk about slide numbering. The other one is the PowerPoint notes content block. And that one is tied directly to the notes section of our PowerPoint. So the slide content block really has 3 functions. It allows us, it's got 2 functions and some things to keep in mind. It allows us to transfer the slide image. When we take your slides from PowerPoint, it's saved out as an image, and then it's going to take that image and it's going to drop it into the location you chose where you chose to put your PowerPoint, which we'll talk about in a few moments. So this is what allows us to bring images from your facilitator guide and drop them into take images from your PowerPoint and drop it into your facilitator guide. This is also the PowerPoint content block allows us to also, from a guidebook, let's say that we haven't built out slides from, we can actually create PowerPoints directly from this slide content block and send information back to PowerPoint to make them visually appealing. And we're going to demonstrate that a little bit later today. The slide content block is also, it's vital for when we use the replace function in PowerPoint. So on session 2, we're going to dive really deep into the add and replace functionality and how those work. In order to replace, it matches up the slide content block with the corresponding slide number in your PowerPoint deck. So slide content block 1 will match up with the first slide in our PowerPoint deck, and so on. So if you want to do the replace functionality, you need to have slide content blocks in your document and in order. The other type of content block that that PowerPoint manages or uses is the notes content block. So this determines where our notes go in when we bring in our PowerPoints. And I should say in this, notes can technically also go into a PowerPoint slide content block into one of the cells that we are not putting our image. And that we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But the notes content block, this allows us to transfer notes from our slides into our guidebook, right? So take my notes and put it into column 2 beneath my slide as an option. I can do that. Right? Or I want to put my notes into column 3. This is what allows it to do it. It will also allow us to transfer notes from our PowerPoint or from our guidebook back to the corresponding slide in our PowerPoint. So if you updated some notes in a PowerPoint notes content block, that can be synced back to your PowerPoint slides. It's a functionality that's there, so if you want to make that work, you need to have the slide notes content block. I will say best practice when we bring in our notes is to start maneuvering or manipulating the information out of the slide notes or the notes content block and getting that into other content blocks, right? So we'll talk a little bit about it today, but we're going to go deeper into that on session 2. But that's really just knowing how these function, right? If you want to bring over notes, more than likely you're going to be using the notes content block, right? If you're bringing over slide images, those are going into the slide content block. So both of those are just going to, understanding how those work are just going to make your life a lot easier. All right. So that's kind of setting the base. I know probably spent about 25 minutes just kind of getting you up and running on some how to be prepared. So let's actually dive in and put some of this into action. So we are going to be looking at now creating guidebooks from PowerPoints. And we're looking at this really today. We're going to look at it 2 ways to build. We're going to look at building it from our slides and our notes. Right? So I've got, you've got a PowerPoint deck and you want to bring that over with notes. We're going to do that. We're also going to look at it. Let's say you're building out a guidebook, but you don't have slides, but you know where they're going to go. We're going to show that. Session 2, we're going to add in another, one more way, and in session 3, we'll add in a 4th way, just to kind of get everyone up and running. I don't want to overwhelm anybody with too much information today, but this is really where we're starting from. All right, so let's jump in, and we are going to jump over to Word, and we're going to start building out a guidebook. Right. So, and for those who have used, and I believe most of you today have used LeaderGuide Pro in the past, but if you haven't, there is, within Word on the Word ribbon, when LeaderGuide Pro is installed, we end up with LeaderGuide Pro as an option. And when we want to start building a guidebook, we're going to come over to the Start section. We're going to click on that first dialog box, or the first icon, which looks like a blank file, which is going to open up a series of dialog boxes to help us start building out our guidebook. So on this dialog box, right, it's prompting us through a whole series, and I'm not going to spend, we'll briefly talk about a few things on here and how that applies to PowerPoints. But if you want to learn more about just starting a new guidebook, we have a series of videos, or just reach out to me directly. But so we're going to call this PPT Masterclass Session 1. The big thing on here to look at for today is in the column section, right? When we're building out, when we're choosing to bring over our PowerPoints, whether we choose column 2 or column 3 is going to determine how many options we have on where do we want to put our slides and where do we want to put our notes. Right? If we choose a 2 column, you have 3 possible looks of, different looks you can have based off where you can put your slides, and which would then open up where you would put your notes. Where if you choose column 3, you actually have 7 different possible looks off of, just because you've got more options, right? We've got 3 columns, and that just opens up, a few more choices on where you want to put things. I, for facilitator guides, really like to go a 3-column guidebook, and I tend to do a 2-column guidebook for participant guides. But one of the things I am going to challenge you, if you've never done it, probably just go, if you've never built before, go 3-column and 2-column for facilitator and participant guide at the moment. If you have done it, if you kind of have something that you've done, right? You've always done 3-column and put the image over in column 3. Take a sample guidebook, try something new, right? We're trying to open up the doors to some other possibilities, so let's put ourselves outside of what you normally do. Doesn't say you don't have to go back to it, but just try something new. But so we're going to go 3-column. I'm going to choose my collections, all of those type of things. Select OK to start building. Right. And this is where it's going to run through. It pulls all the templates and starts stitching them all together to start building out our guidebooks. We're going to get prompted to save, right? And big thing on saving, it's all in your environment. We don't have access to it. It is also good. Remember we said to basically you want your PowerPoint saved locally when you're extracting. It's always good to build locally, so save your facilitator guide or your guidebook to your local drive, and then later on check them into the into your network drives. But here's where we get to the proverbial fork in the road when we're building facilitator guides. Are you ready to add images to your document now? So if I say yes, and which is what I am going to do, this allows us to bring in from PowerPoint. It also allows us to bring in Apple Keynote slides, or if you have a folder full of well-organized pictures, you can do that. If I chose no, I would get a shell document and I could start building from there. But because we're working on PowerPoint, right, we're going to say yes, which is going to kick off a series of dialog boxes to help us with the process of building, or of importing our PowerPoints and our notes. So we're set for bringing over PowerPoints as the default. In the right-hand side of this, dialog box, it's showing us what we chose for our document structure, right? 2-column or 3-column. If you kind of scroll down, you'll see, I chose a 3-column, so we have got column 1, column 2, or column 3. If it was a 2-column, what we're seeing is column 2 and 3 would be merged together, so you just have column 1 or column 2. And why this matters is it's talking about where do we want to place our image. Do we want to put our image into column 1, which would replace the PowerPoint slide icon that we saw in the last little section we talked about, right? Replace the icon. You would still have the slide 1 or slide whatever above it, but you have a thumbnail in column 1. It could go into column 2, or it can go into column 3. So regardless of, or I shouldn't say regardless, based on our choice in what we put into, if we put into column 1, column 2, or column 3, you may have noticed the options of where I can put my PowerPoint notes change. So if I put my image into column 1, I can put my notes into column 2, column 3, or into a separate notes content block beneath it. Where if I put my image into column 2, I have a choice to put my notes into column 3, or again, create a notes section beneath it. And then if I put my image into column 3, I can put my notes into column 2 or beneath. So you've got, this is where I said you've got 7 possible look and feels, or 7 possible scenarios is probably a better word than look and feels. But 7 different layout options. I like to put my image into column 2, and I put my notes beneath, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. But what you want to do, I think you want to be consistent in how you build, but at the end of the day, whatever the material may be the driving factor. Like, right, 90% of the time I put stuff into my images in column 2, I put my notes beneath, and I start flushing it out from there. But that leaves open the chance that on this training it makes sense that we're not doing a 3-column, we're doing a 2-column, and I'm putting my notes into column 1, or I'm putting my image into column 1 and my notes are going into column 2 next to it, or maybe my image is going into column 3 and my notes are going into column 2 next to it. Right? I'm leaving the possibility open that for a specific course it makes more sense for me to build this way than that way. Wrong one. This is the one we wanted. All right. So we'd make our choices. So I'm going to put my image into column 2. I'm going to put my notes beneath. I'll click OK. And now we get prompted with a dialog box. This is just showing us, here is the PowerPoints that are currently open in my system. And so best practice, have your PowerPoint that you want to pull from already open. If it, with it being already open, it will be in this list and I can select it. If it's not in this list or I didn't open it up, if I click cancel, I will get an open a PowerPoint file dialog box. I would browse to the PowerPoint file I wanted, which will then basically move us to the next stage. But best practice, have your PowerPoint already open. And just to show you, I have mine set up. Bring this over so we can see it. So I have I just have a sample PowerPoint. Get that out of the way. Right, so I've got, in this case, I've got slides and notes. Right, on this one, I had shown, at the moment, these 2 are set up as hidden slides. Right, so maybe I'm going to bring, I'll unhide it, so I'll have 4. Out of my 5, 4 will come over. All right, so let's come back here. So that's my PowerPoint deck. I'm going to choose OK. All right, so now I have on this TOC outline markers page, and we're going to dive deeper into this next session. But on the left-hand side is showing us all the slides that I have. On here, just for time purposes today, I've already gone in and put in my course structure of modules and lessons. Those are already in place. But next session, we'll dive into how to manipulate this and how to build from here. But once everything the way you want it, we click Close, which will bring us to our last dialog box. And this is the one I was kind of showing you in some of these examples, right? Where we have control over what image quality are we bringing over, right? Because we're going to take your slides and we're going to convert them from a series of shapes and text boxes and images and video and all those different things, and we're going to actually save it out as an image. You can control your pixels per inch, which will help for printing purposes. Your image format from JPEG to TIFF, which will determine really your file size. I mean, both of these will determine file size, but by making these choices, you have control over how big or how large of a file image is being dropped into your PowerPoint. At the moment, you're going to leave adding as first time. But we now get to this transfer section. What are we bringing over? Is it just our slides, right? Maybe there's slides, but there's no notes. Or maybe our notes are great, but we may need new slides, right? We could do notes only. Today, we're going to do both. Next week, we're going to dive into, I think it's going to be next, maybe this one may be on the third session. We're going to talk about a way that I think we should really consider building more often, which is to bring over our notes without our PowerPoints. This is a really I think is an exciting way to build, but we're not going to go there today. So today we're going to do both. Because this is our first time bringing in slides, you can see it's an ad. Now, what are we bringing over? We're going to bring over all our slides, but you can do a selective range. So when we mark selective, you can come down and you can say, slides 1 to 3, 7, 9 through 12. And of course, in doing that, I hit the wrong button. So we're going to... This is the joy of doing everything live, because I think I just brought over a few slides. Or no slides. All right, so we're going to do this again. So let me close this out. Don't save. You guys don't need to see that. All right. So real quick, and I apologize about that. So build this out. And you also, I'm going to sell this actually. I did this on purpose, so that you can actually see, if you're not talking about it, how quickly you can get through this whole process, right? So all the templates coming in, we're going to get prompted to save here in a moment. Basically, we're waiting for the dialog box that says, are you ready to add images to your document now? And even though it looks like something wasn't happening, in the background, a lot of the final templates were being applied. So I'm going to say yes that we're bringing in images, right? Those were the choices I wanted. Here's the PowerPoint deck. Right. These are the slides. Right. Make my choices. Now we're going to see our slides and notes come over. So as simple as that, going through this, right, making our choices on which pieces we want to bring over, it quickly builds out our guidebook. And what we're going to, what we see, and let me jump over here to kind of an easier look to see this. Today, we're not talking about any of the upfront material. Right? We're going to dive right into what came over. So on there, when I chose to bring over my slides, right, and I chose to build a 3-column document. I put my images into column 2, and so those went into what we're seeing here is that slide content block. Right, so we have the slide content block, and it dropped the image into column 2 based off the choice I made. Because I chose to put my notes beneath, it put my slide or my notes into it generated a notes content block, and it put my notes beneath there. Right, and it's now gone through and it's done that for there's slide 2, slide 3, and slide 4. Right? So in this, notice it's, it brought over 4 slides. But if you remember, and this is just to drive home a point, in this PowerPoint, there was actually 5 slides. Right? Slide 1, slide 2, slide 3 was a hidden slide, slide 4, slide 5. Right? But what came over was just the 4 slides. And this is, we're going to talk about this further as we dive into this, your choices, your slide numbering. Is it absolute? Is it sequential? Is it restart by module? Right? Because in this case, I was building a deck with hidden slides. Sequential may not work, may not be the best option, depending, because I'm now my slide 3 in my PowerPoint, in my actual guidebook, is technically slide 4 in my PowerPoint. So this opens up the door for some other questions, right? If you're using hidden slides, do you need them, right? Why are we hiding? Why are we using hidden slides, right? Is that hidden slide really a slide of information for us, for the facilitator to be prepared, right? Like, what do you need to have on hand? All of those type of things. Well, if that's the case, maybe we should actually be taking better advantage of some of the upfront material in our guidebooks, right? What's the pre-work? What's the required materials? How do you need the room set up? If that's what kind of the stuff that's showing up in hidden slides, let's get it up in here where it makes more sense, and now we can really bring our slide deck down to just the material that we need for building out. So that's, again, we're going to dive into to that one a little bit more. But because this is the basic section, right, I want to make sure we're getting you a foundation, but also kind of opening up our minds of why are we kind of thinking this way, and it's because we're trying. I'm trying to step you into a couple different, some different areas. One of the other items we talked about was, when we take, I talked about best practice about taking our slides. Let me get to our actual notes. Right, so when we bring over our slides and our notes, right, the notes came over directly into our PowerPoint notes block. And I know what I see a lot of times is that a lot of new users to LeaderGuide Pro will go through and they will just take their notes section and, have, basically just set it up so that whatever the text that's in there, right, they have their slide, they have their notes section, and the notes is all flushed out. Maybe they've combined it over into two content, into a 2-column content block, right? And I have my slides and my notes. And again, we're going to dive deeper into this because I think this is a bigger item to consider. But this is, when we go that route, when we go the route of just having slides and then just having our notes block, we open up the door for there to be, to make our guidebook, make our LeaderGuide Pro document less functional. We've got, one of the great features of LeaderGuide Pro is from one type of guidebook, we can extract out pieces to build another guidebook. So you build a facilitator guide. If you have a facilitator guide and it strictly has slide content blocks and slide note content blocks, and then we flushed out the information in column 2, right? We flushed information out in column 2 of our slide note block of like we're saying this and we're doing this and we're running this activity, but it's all in this one content block. When we go to do an extract, basically I'm going to have the choice to bring over my slides and bring over my note content blocks. Those are my options because it's the content block itself, right? It's this item that allows me to do it, or it's that, it's that content block. Everything that's in that in a slide content block would go over, or everything that's in the notes content block. But if I actually start using some of the higher end functions, getting into the content block section of the ribbon, right? So if I get up here into instructor-led or virtual instructor-led, and I start putting in other content blocks, right? Like if I wanted the facilitator to say something, and I can choose say out of this block, right? And I can put that in. Or I can now put in, right, like this. And I think what the third one I had was activity, just as an example. But I could put these in, right? And now, all right, I could start just manipulating the material and getting it all over into this. Right? And I've got all these different things, and maybe there's an objective block, right? And I can put all these pieces into there. And I can now get rid of this notes block. But now looking at this, and maybe on this one there isn't, right, I wanted that to go across 2 columns. If I was to look at this as a facilitator guide, one, it's easier for my facilitator, right? We're showing this slide, and maybe I've given some instructions over in that 3rd column. And here's the objective of what we're doing, and then we're going to say something, and then we're going to do this, and then we've got this activity that we're going to run. The guidebook is laid out in a much easier for a facilitator to use layout, but it also then allows us to go in and say, from a facilitator guide, bring over my objectives and bring over my knowledge check or this do block, and bring over my activities, but don't bring over my say block and don't bring over this block. And now I've gone from a facilitator guide to a participant guide with all the relevant information, or 80 to 90% of the relevant information that needed in the participant guide with a few mouse clicks, because I've set up my facilitator guide in a way that just makes my life easier. So that's what when we talked about being able to best practice of breaking our notes out of that PowerPoints block, that's what I'm talking about. And that this one, I'm going to harp on it throughout all of these sessions because I think it's paramount to get the most out of your guidebooks is to get them out of that notes section and truly just use the notes section, right? Just use this notes section here, truly just to transfer information back and forth between slides from the slide deck and the PowerPoint deck. To me, I think is going to be paramount for building guidebooks that are easy to use and easy to then extract other items from. All right, so that was building from slides and from notes. So let's look at this now as if we were going to be building this from strictly, if we're building this from, we had a guidebook and we didn't have any slides or notes. So easiest way for me to do this at the moment, and we're going to pop back over here. I'm going to go through and I'm just going to quickly delete out my 4 PowerPoint decks, or 4 PowerPoint slides. These content blocks. So we're going to imagine I've started building out this guidebook, right? I started a guidebook and I chose no, right? I chose not to bring over my slides, right? And maybe I've just brought over my notes, or maybe I've gone in and I've chosen, I've just started putting in different content blocks, right? Like we're going to come in and the facilitator say something like, welcome to the class, right? And maybe I'm giving them a note over here in the, in column 2. And then I'm like, you know what? Well, welcome to the class. I want them to have a slide, right? I want to have a slide behind me when it's coming on. So what I can do is go up into the content block section, drop down instructor-led, and insert in a slide content block, the PowerPoint slide. And then in column 2, so if we are in a 3-column, in the middle column, so in column 2, or if it's a 2-column, still column 2, it's just a bigger one, I can write down, capture the ideas in words, no images, but capture the ideas of what I may want to have on the slide. Right, so maybe I'm saying, image of butterfly. I don't know. I'm obviously making this up. But I can capture these ideas. And then I could continue along, right? So after, so we're welcoming people to the class. I'm showing a slide. We're going to run an activity, right? And we can put in whatever text we wanted about that. Right, and now maybe I'm going to need another slide for the activity. Oh, wrong content block. Right, so I can come in and I can put in another slide block. Right, and let's say this is going to be my activity slide. Right, and again, just continue just building out our training. We're capturing it. And then, maybe in lesson 2, like I know here, I need another slide. So I'm going to put in what I want to be on this slide. So again, I'm just capturing, kind of the thoughts. And I would just work my way through a guidebook, doing all of these individual things, putting these in where we need them. And then when you're ready, what you can do in the controls section under special, we can now come down and we choose the third option, which is create from text, PowerPoint only. When I choose this, what it does is it creates, right? If you notice, it switched me over to PowerPoint, and it has set up what I'm going to call a vanilla PowerPoint. So it's taken the text that was in column 2, right? So on slide 3, my text was what I want on slide 3, capture thoughts. Right, when I'm looking here, if I go to slide 3, so whatever the text was in column 2, it brings it over. Right? So now you've built out your training, or the rough draft of your training. Now you wanted to work on the images, right? The visual items that are going to help you along in this process. Well, now I can go through and start taking these ideas that I've typed out and crafting strong visuals to support my training. So, I'm going to go the cheap route. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to go to the design center at the moment just because I know we're coming up on time. But I could now come through and, visually make, set up these slides, put in animations, all of those type of things. Right? I can go to slide 2 and again start just laying this out the way I want it. And obviously, right, so I could, wrong thing, but I could start taking the items that I need out of these, adding in new things, right? Like I could add in new images, add in text boxes, all of those. I'm just using the design as the moment just to fake the actual creation of slides. But once we were happy with the way it was, I would then click save, save out my document, give it a name. File, save. I'm just going to drop this in my downloads folder. All right, so I've saved out my PowerPoint. And now what I'm able to do is if I flip back over to my LeaderGuide Pro document, all right, and maybe obviously open it back up if you've closed it out. And this is kind of our big market tease, and we're going to talk about, this is where we're starting off really next week. But we're going to come down under special, and we're going to go into the replace function. And on here, we get prompted, are you replacing PowerPoints or Keynote slides? So click yes for PowerPoint. So I'm going to say yes for PowerPoint. And now I can choose out of the list which slides I wanted. So I'm going to choose the one I just saved. And then, make my choices of what am I bringing over. And again, we're going to dive into this in depth next week. But just asking, we want to replace the image in column 2, which is where I want it to go. So I'll say yes. But it would run through, and now into those slide content blocks, it's brought over the images that I was able to create based off of these slide content blocks that I pushed the text information from my guidebook to PowerPoint as ways to remind me of the type of slides that I want, and then I can bring those back over. So those are the two main ways of building out. We're going to go into the other two that we're going to talk about over sessions 2 and 3. Kind of, they're offshoots of both of those. But today, I just wanted to kind of give you a foundation of where of starting using PowerPoint with LeaderGuide Pro. The more we can spend kind of asking yourself some of those questions in that getting prepared stage, right? Where's my slide deck located? What's in that slide deck? Are there notes? Are there hidden slides? Are there slides that have upfront material in them that then really could be transferred into some of the templates or up into some of the upfront material in LeaderGuide Pro? Even things like, do I have a content block of do I have a PowerPoint slide of my objectives, right? Well, if one of the things is we're trying to narrow down, we're trying to remove death by PowerPoint, right? Well, maybe I can stop using a slide for PowerPoint objective or for course objectives, and I can use the slide objective content block because that's going to be both in the facilitator guide, and I could bring it over to the participant guide. And now in their participant guide, they have the objectives, and I don't necessarily need to push them behind. I don't have to have them behind me. And maybe I can just make a more visual idea about objectives. So just want to challenge you to rethink kind of, here's what our cut and dry way of always building out PowerPoints or how we bring these in. But for next week, I'm going to put this recording together. I'll get that off, I'm hoping, by tomorrow. After that, we are going to look at what I would do. If you built out a guidebook before, take a PowerPoint, cut it down to 5 slides, put some, make sure there's some notes in it. But try if you've always built 2 column, try 3 column and put them in some of the different options, right? If you've done 3, put them in different options or go to 2 column. Again, I'm not saying you're going to necessarily need to do, that your way of doing it is wrong or you should change it, but it's good to see options, right? Just start with those. I'm going to put together, after session 2, there will be a little bit of, some more activities to work on, but that's where we're at for today. We're actually at the hour, which is amazing that I came in right at it. But anybody have any questions at the moment that I can answer? And again, I don't know, my chat's disappeared. But if you do, feel free to reach out to me directly. And other than that, I will have this recording off to you guys in the next little bit.